So you're at a facility and you're putting 4 hours on your dirt bike. You got to remember, and I'm not trying to insult anyone's intelligence. As you bring the heart rate up, calorie burn
Calorie
rate's
load
going
goes
up.
up. Right.
So now that athlete's burning 45. Let's say that we double that. Let's say that, and I have seen these numbers, 6,000 calories on a given day. That's 80 extra large eggs, just to put it in a volume perspective.
And to the point of you, I think you're getting at is what I was going to say was these are kids who can scarf down some food, but go put 3 or 4 or 5,000 calories worth of food in front of them, and they're gonna be like, I can't eat all that.
I
All
can't
day.
eat it all.
It's
And this
hard for a
is,
kid that size to eat that many calories. You're
it
gonna have
is
to
for
be
you as
smart
an
about
adult.
right.
It is for
Fueling
you as an
that kid. So
adult.
to your points about Loretta's, properly fueled, properly fed,
Fed,
fueled,
hydrated.
properly hydrated, fit, and rested, which is probably if all the things that most people screwed up. So for next year, Loretta's, or for next year, Spring Nationals, or for Baja Brawl, or for
Yes.
anything coming up in your schedule, odds are if you were to rest more, ride less, you would be better off at this next event. And that's just the irony of it.
Quality over quantity. Because I always say to my clients, practice doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. And that's where I think the riding coaches of the world, the Kevin Wyndhams, the Ryan Sipes, the Andrew Shorts, I don't know if Andrew's a riding coach or not, but we were talking about him in the vet class. If Andrew told me to stand on my head, rub my belly at 12 o'clock noon on Wednesday, I'm going to do it. Right.
Yep.
If that's the kind of confidence that we have on these guys. The question is, it's no different than me hiring you to build my motors. And then you build the motor and then I don't run the gas the way it's supposed to, or I don't run the right oil, or I don't run the right air filter. Well, of course it's not going to run because it's not spec'd to these other elements. It's got to be spec'd to the way it was built. That's why I want to go back to, you build a bike, it has characteristics. Every listener and every listener's child has characteristics relevant to their athlete. You have to develop a program around the athlete. This is another one of my soapboxes. I cannot tell you how many parents were pissed off at Loretta's because they now realize my little Johnny, my little Susie, that by the way, it could be a 250B or a pro sport rider. Wow, we were doing everything that the facility hotshot was doing. It wasn't relevant to us as an athlete. It was, we're just getting everything funneling downstream. Your program needs to be customized. Now, Derek, I'm going to steal one of your lines, and I told you I appreciated it. It hit me like a ton of bricks. When I got a lot of compliments, I said, man, Derek knows his shit. I'm like, yeah. And I shared that with you, and you came on and you kind of surprised me when you're like, yeah, but there's a lot of smart people like me out there. And I love that comment, and I'm going to steal that line. I'm not saying you guys have to utilize us. I'm just saying that we've got definitive processes and systems. When you ask me the question, what do we see repetitively year over year? Not able to handle heat and humidity, not able to do a 20-minute moto. The idea that they don't know what to eat, how much and when, or they do try to scarf down food, it makes them sick to their stomach because the complexity of the food was so complex. Of course, the body's going to regurgitate it. When the heart rate's elevated, it's hot, it's humid, there's a lot of stress. All of those attributes suppress appetite. Then you bring in the idea that, again, they're coming in absolutely exhausted. Notice how I mentioned, Eric, fed, hydrated. By the way, there's a specific order: fed, hydrated, then rested. The only way you can improve sleep is to satisfy hunger. It's called the hierarchy of needs. We don't have to talk about it today. And did you notice my fourth one is focused? Everybody gets pissed off because their athlete can't focus, but they're not hydrated. I'm going backwards now. They're not rested, they're not hydrated, and they're not fed. Well, you can't sleep until you're fed, hydrated, then you'll sleep, and you won't get to focus until you're fed, hydrated, rested, and then you can focus. And this is what we see at Loretta's. They spent X amount of dollars on a brand new bike and motor. They got the suspension. They've hired you to come and make sure it runs like a charm. And then they put a throttle jockey on there that's exhausted. Their hour meter, it's clearly saying they need a rebuild. Well, it's too late. How many people did you talk to? And I want the listeners to think about this. How many people did you talk to? Because I have a number. How many people reported to you that they got sick on Monday at Loretta's?
Oh, interesting. So I'm not in your world. So for me, we come back to shop and we just start grinding again. Right? But I'm actually curious on that. So I did hear somebody did hit me up and it said, hey, I think we got, so yeah, you're right. I actually did get a report on that, and makes perfect sense.
But think about it. When does a motor let go?
Right before, when it's worn out.
Full load.
Yep.
And then as soon as it goes off. So when we go off the face of the jump, the motor's under full load, it's tired. And as soon as it goes from full load to no load, remember John Ames at
Yep.
Mitneo's.
Yep.
It was outdoors and it was on that double step up towards the road.
Yep.
Robb, and goes off, motor cuts out. He breaks both of his femurs because he takes it straight across the thigh on
Yep.
both. And that's what I want the parents to realize. Your athlete got ground to a nub through trainers and facilities. They come in completely exhausted. Now you're just collectively getting around more and more people. So now when you're exhausted, your immune system is suppressed. There's, excuse me, all these microbes. You're touching things, you're shaking hands,
And you're
you're
around a
hugging, you're
lot
saying
of
hi.
people from all over the country.
Yes. And now you've got a
every time I fly, I
perfect.
used to get sick. I'm starting to get over that, but like, it's
Yep.
obvious why. I'm
Well,
getting
like with
exposed to
my
things.
athletes, if you fly to the race, you need to have echinacea golden seal. That's an herb that kills the bacteria on the inside, kills the microbes. You should be using a neti pot, flush your sinuses out because the virus can only get in through your mouth, your nose, and your ears. And then the other thing is have a 50-50 mixture of hydrogen peroxide and rubbing alcohol. Because if you get water trapped behind the eardrum, now your proprioceptive balance is off. So total of all that's about $10.
Right.
Right.
And it's something that helps tremendously.
It's an insurance package.
Yep.
Now you've got to make sure that when you get to Loretta's, you're rested, fed, and hydrated. Now they can focus on riding a motorcycle that they purchased from you that's fast and balanced. And what's a perfect day for me? And we've said this in every show. My dream day is when a rider rides the living wheels off the motorcycle that you built. And when that motorcycle is being pushed to its max limit and it faces everything the track has to serve, when the track serves it through the bike back to the rider's still pushing the bike to its fullest potential. That's Jet Lawrence at its
So
finest.
we're working on it. Unfortunately, it hasn't happened as quickly as I'd like, but on our 4-stroke side, we have it. We've discussed this, and that's our data logging, data acquisition on the bike. I can tell you how much throttle you had. I can tell you the RPM. I can tell you what gear you're in. I can tell you everything, right? Yeah. There's some things I'd like to know more about, like that some of the teams have, and we could add it in, like clutch position, stuff like that. But that's a little bit nuanced. It's a little bit challenging to do. Sure. But that said, we can tell, right? And the irony is, I have this data from Loretta's champions. So ironically, even on 250s, as much as parents say they want more power and that the kid needs more power and whatever, you go look at this data and you go, you were at 77% throttle that entire section. You never went to 100. Well, what does a throttle do? It limits horsepower. That's what it does. And until it's all the way open, it doesn't have, it's limiting your horsepower. It's the whole purpose of it. So It's funny you say that. I agree with you. I like to see, when you see an athlete truly riding the bike to its one, to their absolute best, to the bike's best, getting everything they can out of it, shifting the gears at the right times, in the right RPMs, doing everything right. It's the most enjoyable thing to watch, even if the kid's not winning. If that's that best that kid's got and the best that bike's got, it's awesome to watch. And as a parent, you've probably had days like that. Man, my kid is just on it today. He's riding really, really good. Everything's going well. But then, like you said, you go to Loretta's and that kid never showed up. I've said this. The results don't lie. That's not our title today. Your kid is exactly where he showed at Loretta's. So why doesn't he show like he shows at home for you? Or why hasn't he showed like they showed, or he or she at a local race for you? Those are the things you need to leave Loretta's at and do something differently. That's the biggest thing here. You can't do what you did this year and then expect a different result next year. So change something
here's
about
the worst
the program.
part. Here's the worst part. When you look at Loretta's, and I don't know if this will make sense. You're good at being able to decipher if I don't give a good example. How much does an athlete change from the Cobra to pro sport? Those are your years at Loretta's. And how much does a pro change from when they go pro to when they retire? The percentage of change, the number of variables that are constantly changing. So if you get behind early on in the amateur scene, it only becomes compoundingly more difficult.
Compounded interest. Good point.
You've got testosterone drops in. When? How much? How did the body respond to it? AC is a perfect example of this. I had the privilege of working with AC on 85s. He gets plucked up by Mitch. He gets stuck on a factory 250, way too small for the 250. He hits a growing spurt. If you go and you look at his pictures, right? He had to side saddle the 250 when he first got there. And then when he left to go to the 450, his knees were at the bottom of the handlebars. Like he overgrew the 250.
People forget, right? Because they know now. Go look at his rookie year. He looks like a 12-year-old.
Because he was.
Yeah. Physically, genetically, he was at that time. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
But that's where I always want, we don't want to just as a podcast show, we don't want to just throw concepts and ideas. I want you guys to always see the concept and then its immediate application. How is Jet poetry in motion? Bike setup, balance, training with specificity. What blows my mind is you have Dazzy going out and doing whiskey throttle. You have You have Tony, who was kind enough to come on this
Oh,
show.
if you hadn't watched that, you got to go watch that episode. I enjoyed every bit of that.
Well, it's just like you're essentially getting the playbook in front of you. And yet 9.5 out of 10 parents will not do what they said.
Hey, we
Because
know the
my
numbers
son's
of what
different.
we get views wise on YouTube, and you have your podcast
Mhm.
side, but I can guarantee you that not every single parent at Loretta's has seen the Tony Alessi episode of our show. And I
Mhm.
guarantee you that every single parent at Loretta's should watch the Tony Alessi episode of our show.
Another way to rephrase that comment. How many people know who the Alessis are at Loretta's?
Nowadays, right? Exactly.
And how many people know of their success, right? He's in the history books. He's up there in the top 5. And yet, instead of emulating success, and I say this very humbly, I was hoping that we'd get our 300th championship at Loretta's. We ended up getting our 299th. We went there at 298. I was hoping to leave with 2. Nolan Ford gets jumped on, gets his bar sheared in half at the triple clamps. That's racing. It's no big deal. But he won all the other motos. I think he got third in the final moto. But the point being, at that point, he's managing the championship, right? Give up the battle, win the war. The point is this: I can show and discuss all of these things, and I can give you with data. I love that you're able to tell what's the throttle, how much, and all. And I'll say this publicly here. To me, the most valuable part of a race is what you learn from a download, both mentally and physically. The heart rate monitors, they give us sleep quality, they give us sleep ratios, they give us HRV, resting heart rate. I have food logs, right? My Fitness Pal goes into Garmin. So I can look at food in versus food out. I can look at expenditure, sleep ratios, blah, 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 blah. Nolan Ford went and won. That's what he went there to do. Am I surprised? No. That's what he
Because you
went there to
expected
do.
it because he's done the right things.
Well,
Right.
but
Like I said,
here's the
I'm
thing.
hard on people. And
But
you've said
here's the
this.
thing. I expect Chase Dashel to win. I
Right.
expect Aiden
Right.
to win. I expect everybody to win because that's what they train to do. So I'm
Right.
not surprised when Derek, fast as heck on a motorcycle, goes and wins because that's what you train to do. What's valuable to me to serve you tomorrow and next week and next year is the downloading of the telemetry, the data dump on the mental. We integrate them, but here's the problem. Not a problem. It's always an opportunity. The ones that I work with, they're the ones that are asking for the questions on how do we get better. And I always say to them, because you're willing to look underneath the hood a little bit, sometimes it's a little raw, it's a little vulnerable. There's 99.99% of your competitors on the starting gate who don't know what the glycogen synthase enzyme is. They don't understand the true value of a warm up, and they can't differentiate a warm up between being hot at the starting gate. There's a difference between being metabolically warmed up and physically hot.
Right.
Well, guess what? For every person that's on the gate that doesn't know it, you've already got a distinct advantage before the gate drops. Now, if I have confidence and I know exactly when to and I ask this question all the time when I teach performance camps, when are you grabbing that second shift on the start? Because with 41 other bikes, you can't hear yourself think.
Yep.
And how many people did you talk to? Yeah, we missed our second shift and we got pounced on the first turn, went through the first turn in 37th. Well, that could have been avoided because you can practice that.
You can practice that.
But the point being is when the race is over and someone says, Derek, I just can't tell you that bike delivered power unbelievably. All right. Well, what does your question stem around? How did you shift? When did you shift? Why did you think to shift? Why did you not shift? And this is, again, I hate to use a negative. When someone has a shit race, they'll give me every single detail. He wouldn't eat. He couldn't sleep. The heat exposed her. She got this. She got that. Well, then when they do win, you just referred to it earlier when a parent says, my rider's on rails today. Okay. Well, if you know how they got on rails, you can duplicate that success. Otherwise, it's called accidental success. Because you ever had that day where Saturday they ride like they're on rails, Sunday they look like they're riding somebody else's motorcycle?
And that's, I don't
Where
know
did
the
the
answer to all of
person
that.
go?
Right. I was gonna say that at the absolute elite level, that's something that has to be figured out. Right. So like whether it's Olympic shooting, whether you're a pool, things that require consistency and repeatability over and over and over again. And I think Chad Reed had talked about this a little bit. I'm sure that there's secrets that none of these elite guys will ever share that what worked for them, but them showing up on Sunday and being their best version of themselves is something that they figured out very consistently. And actually, who said this? It was on the Gypsy Tales podcast. I believe it was Marvin. Yeah, it was Marvin on the Gypsy Tales. I didn't watch the whole thing. I just saw this clip. And no offense to Jace, I just literally haven't consumed much media lately. Was Marvin was like, me and Anderson would whoop Dungy during the week. We were faster and this, that, the other, and whatever. And then we come out in the weekend and he'd kick our ass. Dungey wasn't paid to be a winning guy on the weekdays. He was paid to
Well,
win on Sunday along with the other guys.
well, like
Whatever
what?
Dungey little secrets he had on that, for that particular thing, he sure as hell didn't tell them. And I wouldn't either, to your point. If I'm at a
Yep.
training facility and I'm the baddest dude there, that's bad for me, right?
Hmm.
In general. So if you are the baddest dude at a training facility, you probably need to start thinking about that. And then number two, how do you get better if you're the baddest dude at a training facility? And how do you not let your competition who's directly, and I actually, you know what? I've heard this before and I do believe this. There's a dad who said, I want to beat you on your best day. So if
Hmm.
your kid has a bad day because of bike or this or that, I will help you fix your bike because I want to go out there and beat you legitimately. And I like
Yep.
that. I'm fine with that. If you're at a facility and you've got competition that's directly to you and you're fine with sharing because you're both getting better, good. I'm happy for that. But at the end of the day, if you're just getting robbed from, all your knowledge is getting taken in your speed and your technique and your things, guess what? You're going to get worse. They're going to get better. And you know what I mean? That's not
Oh
going to be
yeah.
good.
No, I totally agree with you 100%. And you can add one more dynamic to all of that. When you look at, and we'll go with somebody who just wrapped the championship up this weekend, Hayden Deegan. His dad, ironically, on Gypsy Tales, flat out said, we did our research. We knew what we needed to surpass to come in and be competitive, and we underestimated how good everybody was. Now, if that doesn't essentially surmise everything that you just said, coming from the dad of the guy who just wrapped up the championship in his first full year outdoors.
Yeah,
Put that
first,
put
yeah,
in
first, yeah.
outdoors. Put that in
I think last year
perspective.
was a full year and he was in title contention, but didn't win because him and Hunter went down to the wire. But at the end of the day,
Oh, that's right. Excuse me. I
yeah,
forgot about
second
that
full
because he
year
won
as a pro. Because I
SMX.
don't.
He won the SMX,
Oh, he
right?
did do. Yeah. He won SMX. Yeah, but I say,
Okay.
it, on that topic, unbelievable, right? The
But
kid
it's
is
the idea
unbelievable.
of divide. First, you have to assess, then
Yep.
you have to divide and conquer.
Yep.
If you're racing against Blake Baggett and or Eli Tomac, and he comes on like a steamroller,
Right.
you better have an answer for that, or he's going to steamroll you. If you know Ken Roxon is a tremendous sprinter and you give him too much rope and he gets too much of a gap and you can't bridge it, you better have a strategy for it, or you're going to be constantly saying, I would have won, i.e., Tim Ferry. I would have been the most
Yep.
winningest 125 rider if it wasn't for Ricky Carmichael.
I
Now,
posted a photo on. Right. Go
You
ahead.
don't think Tim tried to break that code?
Of
I
course.
mean, he about killed himself trying to be
Right.
that. And so
I was
did
gonna say,
Ivan Tedesco and all the other guys.
I posted a story the other day on my Instagram a picture of Deegan and a picture of Tomac through the same corner, and their form is almost identical.
Mm.
Now, I'm not saying go copy Tomac, or I'm not saying go copy Deegan, although let's be frank, you want to go win races,
Copy
one of those two guys
success.
might be pretty good. But
Yeah,
you don't think that Deegan did that by mistake? Or you think that maybe that time spent at Tomac's was a learning
exactly.
experience, that time on film that he's been looking, and then time of
Studying.
self-evaluation.
Hmm.
I said all the time to parents, and they just never listen. Kids don't listen. People don't listen. Is every time you go to the track and somebody's taking photos and you're not doing your staged corner photo, hey, go take photos of me over here.
Yep.
Go get random photos of yourself. Go get random video of yourself. Just constant content, and then come back and look at it. In every single, if you were to freeze frame, do you look like you want to look? Is your form
Hmm.
the right way when you know that nobody's looking? And
Yep.
so if you're working on form, not that complicated. If your photo doesn't look right, do something about it. And
Yep.
eventually you get to a point where every single time you see a photo, it looks correct. That's when you know that you're headed the direction you want to head. Now, what's correct? We could debate that all day long. But to me, what
Exactly.
correct
Yep.
is, you know what? This downhill into a corner in the outdoor nationals, they take Tomac and they take Kinney and they take Chase and they take Hunter, and they all look the same. That's the body position you need to be in that particular section.
Absolutely.
Right? There's some
Well,
little bit of variance, but that section, no question. They all look
yeah.
the same way.
Well, and we've seen it a lot over the last couple of years where you have the European influence. You have Roxon stands up more than usual. You have the Lawrence brothers stand up more than usual. Sexton stands up more than usual. So now that's the flavor of the month. Everybody should stand up in the corners. And then you talk to somebody like a Ryan Sipes or a Ben Riddle, and they'll say, yeah, sometimes stand, sometimes don't stand, which is the raw reality of there's not
Right.
a one shoe fits all. But what I find fascinating, and I always challenge all the parents of the riders that I work with, I don't care if you have to bring somebody from the neighborhood and give them a Coke and a hot dog. Every time your rider's out there, film them and try to get them on the left side and the right side of the bike.
Yeah.
And if you're getting beat by somebody, damn sure get on the left and the right side. What gear are they in? When are they shifting? What gear are they hitting it? They might be grabbing a little gear that you're not aware of, which softens the rear end, which keeps the rear end on the ground. And that's how they're out accelerating you. It's not about going and spending another $5,000 on a motor. Just keep the rear wheel on the ground. Why can't my rider do it? Well, he's doing something that you're not able to figure out. There's a thing called filming for a reason. And I hope that every parent listening to this recognizes every factory team films. Not
Every
one,
factory
not
team.
two. Some teams have up to 4 people doing camera,
And they have
because they're in different
highly
parts.
advanced technical software called Dartfish
Right?
to
But here's the thing.
overlay.
But we have Lit Pro, we have Dartfish, and you have a phone. You have everything a factory team has. Now, is it tedious? Yes, but it's very productive. And I will even go so far along this thread of thought. And Derek, you and I have spoken about this off the record. If you want to impress a team, have your rider be able to sit down and interpret Dartfish and be able to talk to a suspension specialist and a motor and a chassis and a tire, all these people that contribute to when you do go pro and they're trying to get your bike configured, and you go, I don't like the way the bike handles. And they go, what would you like it to do? I don't know. I just don't like it.
Yeah, it's bumpy. Oh, thanks. I appreciate the comment.
So now you've got 4 extremely talented, I think of Bones Bacon at PC, right? Just genius.
I don't care who's working on these factory bikes. I don't know all of them. They change frequently, right? But I can guarantee you they're not stupid.
They know their shit.
They know their shit more than you do as the rider. This is the frustrating part. You might not like what you got, but I promise you, you can't flip positions. And those guys probably ride pretty good. Most of them like to ride. They can switch spots with you and be pretty damn closer to you are to them than you are to that guy's assistant.
Never forget that. Don't
forget that the guy working on your stuff, and I don't care who he is very, very knowledgeable. Because if you can't take apart your suspension and revalve it yourself, don't even lecture that guy on what he doesn't know.
Exactly. And every one of my clients will tell you, like one of my little guys, Jack Deffendahl, phenomenal little guy. I can ask him any question. He will stop. He will disseminate the question and he will try to answer it. Never once does he say, I don't know. Never once does he say, does that make sense? He is willing. And I just think it's such an incredible asset for young kids to have. Learn to articulate. And you're like, yeah, but he's only 8 years old. He doesn't know how. Well, if you never give him a chance to learn, if you never give him a chance or give him the experience, now all of a sudden, you, dad, you think you can see everything politely. You can't. When your rider can start to say, hey, it's kind of pushing in the corner, or the rear end's sitting here, or maybe it's not sitting. Maybe he accelerates and you can just feel it spinning. Or she says to you, hey, it feels like it wants to tuck, taking a line from James Stewart. Okay, well, what does that feel like? What sensation are you having? It could be my role. Your rider's not strong enough, therefore they're getting front wheel heavy, right? Their belly button's gone in front of the pegs. Now we're front wheel heavy. Your suspension guy can't fix that. It doesn't matter what he or she does to your suspension. If your rider is too far forward, you're going to tuck the front end, or you're going to run at least a high risk of it. Okay, so let me fix it to where you're strong enough. But please, when your rider comes off the track and their bike is just not handling well, what is it you would like it to do? And I challenge every one of my clients. Hey, how'd the weekend go? Went great. What do you think of the bike? Oh, handled great. All right, pause the conversation. What do you mean it handled great? What did it do? Because remember I said when someone has a shit day of racing,
they'll
tell you everything that's wrong. But then when they tell me the bike handled like it was on rails, all right, what does that mean? Because then when you go back to your dad, your mom, your mechanic, your suspension specialist, tell them what you're searching for. I love what you said to me. So many people say, oh, we've got to soften it up. When you're not stiff enough to begin with, what you think is rigidity is the fork just blowing through the stroke and bottoming out.
I'll give you a story from this year, Loretta's. I don't think he watched the show. If he does, I've already told it to his face, so he knows my position on it. We did suspension for him about a year ago. He's kind of not new to the sport, but new to trying to chase Loretta's last year. He was about I don't recall it. I have to look it up. I'm going to say a 12th place person at the regional, but his speed was pretty close to what he needed. Probably 8th place speed, 9th place speed, a little bit off on the fitness, and, needed to sort that out, but relatively first year of really trying for it. So they go after it very aggressively this year. And he's a hard worker. The kid's a good worker. He's very fit and all these other things as far as especially for C class, nowadays he's like mini professionals, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we had done suspension for him in the past, and he always complained about the same thing. I think it's too stiff. And I'm like, look, 3 kids before you on that same fork, basically the same chassis and same bike, ran substantially stiffer settings than you that we walked our way into, right? We started softer and walked our way into that stiffness. And that's what they required to go to Loretta's. And they were about the pace you'd like to go, right? They were there at Loretta's in the class you're trying to go for on a very similar bike. It's too stiff. I got to run the air pressure really low. And, then it can turn, and you're trying to tell the guy, hey, your job is to turn the bike. It's not the suspension job to turn. No, and I really like this. So ended up going to another suspension vendor. And there's two reasons. One, they moved, and so we're not local. Went to a local guy. Good. You should work with a local guy. But also went the route of, I need it softer. Okay. Goes the soft route. I just don't understand. And I was actually in some group chat I was in. Well, I just don't know what it is about their stuff, but it feels softer, but then it ramps up really good. It has good progression. And I'm like, no, it's just softer. That's just how valving works. You may not know that, but that's how it works. People don't, we have videos on YouTube. You can go look at the insides of forks. We have A kit to regular stuff, from KYB to Showa to WP. Go watch the videos. If you have no clue how suspension works, you will now be a suspension expert more than half the guys you know in your life. Just go watch them. It's 30 minutes of your life. So goes to Loretta's this year, doesn't make it out of the regional. Should have just breezed through, had whole shots, was out front, was at Thunder Valley, does not make it. And I'm like, well, that's a shocker. Training harder, had pretty good speed last year, had excellent speed this year. But I kind of knew
hitting the ground or just not riding well.
He just went backwards, right?
Okay.
And I don't know what the whole deal was.
So he wasn't on the ground. So it wasn't on the ground.
Just went backwards.
Just want to clarify.
And I don't know. I wasn't there. I didn't watch it. But Thunder Valley, steep hills. If you've never been there, you don't know that.
Oh, yeah.
Loads the suspension really hard. Can be pretty rough. Can be big bumps. You need stiff forks to go down those hills and use the brakes. That's a fact. They had pretty big jumps there. It's a cool track. I love the track.
Yep.
So in my mind, I'm going, that's weird. That's not right. The kid's plenty fit. You're training plenty hard, harder than half the kids in the C class that beat you. I guarantee it. And your bike's plenty good, as far as motor and blah, blah, blah. They've got everything they need to be successful. Gets in as an alternate, goes Loretta's, bad first moto. I showed up. We met up with you guys late in the week. And what I heard was when I got there was my suspension just way too soft. Really? Well, I gave you the stuff that was proven to be as stiff as you needed to be. And in my opinion, it's too soft for like the next level, right? But for you, that was about what you needed. But you're not running that. Okay. Well, what'd you do? I stiffened it up. I went over to so-and-so and, we did it. Cool. It should be good. Next moto, unfortunately for the kid, and I, all you can do is lead a horse to water, right? Goes and lands the Storyland triple, the one going into Storyland. That's not that big of a jump. Like 85s do it. Can't tell me on a 250F that's a big jump. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Lands not into a braking bump, not like a messed up jump or an over brake, even what you should still be able to do.
Sure.
And hit so hard and bottom so hard that his wrist maybe broke it. I haven't talked to him since. But I need to text him, but either broke his wrist or hurt it bad enough that he couldn't continue the race. All because your suspension's too soft.
And you don't want to be an asshole, but it's like, now do you want me to say, I told you so?
I'm not. Yeah, right. I'm not here to tell I told you so.
That's not what we're trying to do on the show here. It's just the definition of insanity is seeing the same thing over and over again.
Take good advice from people who know what they're talking about. Now, unfortunately, the kid does not know I ever rode a dirt bike, right? He's never been around when I rode. And I was joking with him. And I actually do mean this. If we were to ride and I was in the semblance of fitness and my shoulder wasn't blown out, I would still smoke his ass. He's got a long ways to go. Now, there are other kids that are my clients that there's no hope on the planet that I'm as fast as them. I want to be perfectly clear about that.
Certainly.
Right. But this kid's in the C class. He has a long ways to go to reach his peak capabilities. And within a year, I hope that he, achieves those goals. He's got the potential. It's there. But you got to take advice from people that really have been like, hey, this setting has been to where you want to go and it's been in the top 5.
Yeah.
That's who you want to be, right? Yeah. Okay. Maybe you should run it. I know what I'm talking about. And there are other suspension guys that know what they're talking about that will give you similar information. But you want to go down the route of, well, I like the way it turns. And I like when a guy's telling you, hey, make the motorcycle turn. You know what I mean? And on top of that, it's like, more importantly is there are pros who are running incredibly stiff suspension compared to an average, even a B kid at Loretta's. There are pros who they have to run that. These outdoor national pros run crazy stiff stuff in relation to what an average Joe would understand.
Yes.
To them, it's not stiff, but to you or I, it would just, beat the living hell out of us.
Yep.
And it's an energy equation. That's all it is. Energy in is how much damping we have to get out of the suspension. So if you go faster, 1/2 mv squared, that's kinetic energy. The faster you go, the squared the velocity of the suspension, the squared the energy. So at the end of the day, that's why their stuff's so stiff, right? And you got to understand that what feels comfortable at your 80% pace on a relatively smooth track with relatively small bumps is not going to work at 100% pace on big bumps, on faster, rougher things and things like that. And that's just, it's like, that's data driven answers for you. There's actually math and science behind why your suspension has to be a certain way, right? It's not just how you feel.
Hear me, Derek?
Yeah, you're kind of cutting in and out. Am I there? Did I lose you? Do I have internet?
It started to buffer a little bit there.
Okay, yeah, we're starting.
What's so interesting is depending on when people, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Can you hear me okay?
It's buffering a little bit, but I hear you, yeah. Darn.
Here's something that's so interesting is you look at the idea that just this weekend, what was it that Adam C was talking about? He talked about the efficiency factor, that Levi was riding ill, and the more efficient he rides, the faster he can.
I think my internet is doing poorly. You there? I lost you, coach. You there? You there, coach? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. For some reason, it just threw me completely out of Zoom. So we'll have to, I'll have
lost you a little bit there.
Nope, I'll have marketing redo it. You were talking about the idea. Let's get a clean start. All right, guys, sorry about that. We just lost our connection here for a moment. As we always say, Derek, we're only as good as our last connection.
Yeah.
I think what you said is so profound, because you're sitting here talking about, hey, energy in the exponential return on that, right? And here's AC literally in live commentating as a high school graduate with a lot of experience saying, hey, it's all about efficiency. Levi's less than 100% if he can ride efficiently early. And what he ended up doing, he ended up dropping Hymus. It just literally, as we said a little bit earlier in the conversation, we want you to see on the weekend what we're talking about on this show. It's just not a conceptual idea.
No, this isn't just a talking point.
No, you guys are literally watching it manifest itself on the track. For those of you that work with me, how much do we talk about proprioceptive balance? Working in a 3-dimension of movement. And then you have JS7 talking about how Jet lets the bike dance underneath him. That's all proprioceptive balance. His ability
you know what's
to get
funny about that?
ruts.
Speaking about technically on Jet's bike or any of these guys' bikes. So let's say there's Caden is a good example of this as a problem for him. He likes stiff setup, really stiff, because he really likes to push the bike hard sometimes into a braking bump section or whatever, right? So you're going faster than a C kid. You're heavier. He's a big, tall, strong kid. And then he brakes like crazy hard through a really big bump. Well, when you do all those things, you need really stiff suspension.
Sure.
The problem is if you're on the gas, unloaded on the front, not braking, and you have no load on the front and you hit a bump, it's really stiff, right? That's a give and take of suspension. And there is no in between. I can lecture, I can go become blue in the face. We can talk about this. At the end of the day, there literally is no in between when it comes to damping. That's just how it works. So can you finagle it a little bit this way, that way? I always describe it as squeezing a balloon. We have a balloon. It's all one size and shape. I can squeeze here, but I get a change over here, or I can squeeze here and I get a change over there. There's no way to custom tailor that balloon exactly how you want it. And motocross is hypersensitive to this stuff, meaning like trophy trucks have more leeway than motocross bikes do on suspension, and they have more technology than we do in some ways.
Yeah.
But you can't fit it on a dirt bike. So that's why we don't have it. So anyway, that's the give and take. So on Caden's negative is, okay, I got this really stiff suspension that lets me do what I want to do. And I'm giving him as an example. I'm not blowing him out. There are tons of riders who are set up this way. And this is who drive suspension companies nuts because they constantly want stiffer and stiffer and stiffer suspension for one scenario, but then they want more plushness in other scenarios, right? And you just can't have both. Are you there, coach? I think I lost you again. Oh, are you there? I think we lost coach here. Hey there. Audio. Click your mic. Click your mic. I don't have any audio yet. Your mute button, maybe far left. There you go.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Yeah,
I think your internet just came in and out twice. I've had that happen.
I don't know why, because I'm sitting here. Yeah, it definitely is my internet, because it just says unstable and then it just hangs up on us. So why don't we do this? I want you to
start over again, and I'll start over, and I'm going to concise it anyway, and then they'll clip whatever out that we need to.
Yeah. All right.
So you're going to say before that, oh, you're talking about jet. So bring up jet thing a little bit.
Yep. All right, guys, I apologize for the technical difficulties there. When we were looking at, we were just, before we got cut off here, we were talking about the idea that jet lets the bike float underneath them. And Derek, you were starting to talk a little bit about what Caden says in regards to the way he likes to ride the bike.
Different ways to ride the bike. And James is not wrong about flowing and about AC about flowing, but let's talk about the mechanics of it, of the physics of it on the bike, for example. So the way Jet rides a motorcycle and Hunter, and what they're trying to bring to the sport, is a better balance overall. If we can just be more balanced in suspension setup and riding technique, we can get a total better result. Why do they look so smooth? Well, that's one of their focal points. So for example, Chase is probably on the other end of the spectrum and makes his settings a little bit more challenging. Is Caden liked a really stiff front end in general and overall suspension, because he really would brake hard and charge hard into big braking bumps. And when you're going really fast under a lot of force, because he's a big, tall, strong kid, and then he's faster than a C kid, right? He's a Loretta's champ pro rider. When you load those forks really hard, well, guess what? We need to make them really, really, really stiff, so that when they hit that bump at a high rate of speed, we absorb that energy. And it's just an equation. So we absorb it without taking all that energy to bottom and then having unabsorbed energy, right?
Okay. Yep.
On the flip side of that, what the Lawrences are trying to do and are doing very well is they're going to run a softer suspension setting than Caden would be running in that scenario. And obviously, you know, you're trying to teach and Caden learns. This is an example of Caden. There's a million other riders of this way.
Sure.
So if they don't brake as hard and they don't load the front as hard, they don't need to run as much valving for that scenario. But on the flip side, they get to make up on the exit of a corner or on bumps that are not loaded so hard. So Caden would always have, okay, it's good here, but then I have it so stiff that I'm on the gas and I'm not loading the front tire and I hit a square edge and it doesn't absorb at all, because I needed the stiffness for when I am loaded. So the Lawrences have gone what I would call more of a middle of the road setting. They're not soft by any means. Like if you or I were to ride that bike, it's stiff.
Yep.
But they've gone softer than, say, a Chase had in the past. And in other riders like James or like potentially Tomac, I think outdoors, Tomac runs really, really, really stiff forks from what I've watched on film. And so they are able to say, look, we're not going to brake so hard. We're going to let off the brakes. We're going to let off the load of the bike and let it work through those bumps so the suspension can be a little softer, but they're not bitching about the fact that it's a little softer. They've changed their technique around the way they ride a little bit to make that softer setting work. And then on the flip side of it, they make up for that little bit, maybe like they can't quite push as hard through the bumps. You know, maybe a Tomac could, or Chase can just manhandle it a little bit harder through that bump section and get a wheel on them, but they make up for it on okay, after that bump section and the smaller bumps or the exit of the corner or traction, because their front end's a little softer, they're
Yep.
able to make up for it on other areas of the track. And in my opinion, their philosophy has been, let's make the best bike on average everywhere around the track, as opposed to let's make the best bump through the bike through the braking bumps.
Sure
Let's
enough.
make the best bike, bike on the G outs or the big hits or the big landings, things that maybe other guys are more focal pointed on.
Yep.
And that's what, so when you let that bike work, well, that just means, hey, we're going to have a bike setup and a technique that go hand in hand and are symbiotic in a relationship to work better. Now, this isn't easy. I'm just talking like it's easy. It's not. And it would take, again, they have a, how smart is their suspension guys over there? Pretty damn
Brilliant.
smart. How smart is Honda?
Brilliant.
Pretty damn smart.
Yeah.
So this didn't just happen overnight, right?
No.
This has been years of work on their part to come up with a setting they like. And by the way, as much as they like that setting, I guarantee you they're still working on it every day to try to find that next little penny, under the mattress. They're always
Absolutely.
chasing, because that's the job of race teams. And guess what? Chase is doing the same thing, and Tomac is doing the same thing, and Jason Anderson's doing the same thing. All these teams. That's what I love about racing. You sleep a little bit, and somebody else finds this advantage. And so that's this side note. What does that mean from a technical standpoint? That's what we're talking about.
Well, and I think it's not coincidental that Deegan took the time to go out and train with Tomac. I mean, why would you try to figure out why not emulate success? And that's the way I look at, and not because you're a partner on this show, but that's why I've always looked at, and we've talked about it, even going into Loretta's. I think everybody should have an agent. Do I communicate with Lucas Myrtle? Yeah, I do, but I don't get a kickback for making that comment. I'm saying I want to make the path for the parents the easiest, relatively speaking, from point A, where you're at, to where you want to be, point C, right?
And we talked to Andrew Short about that. And he said, when you're young, you need an agent. That was his
Absolutely.
opinion.
Well, and then even, when you look at the idea that these guys think about, I think Daniel Blair brought it up on his overreaction show this morning or yesterday, I guess he would have put it out. If Deegan is really going to partner with Reed, do you think that those guys want to spend a lot of time negotiating deals and contracts and trucks and wraps and gear deals? And no, they're going to hand that off to whoever does that. I don't know who manages his stuff, because I know Brian does a lot of it, but Brian's also doing a great job, like Tomac's dad, focusing on the business at hand. But I do want to elaborate on just one extra component associated with that is, and I'm not saying this to blow smoke up your skirt because you're on the show with me, but you're working already with pros. So now we have an amateur parent who can pay to get knowledge that you're essentially giving, professional teams are paying a premium to have your knowledge. Well, you don't siphon that knowledge off based on it's a 65 versus a factory 450 or a pro 450 bike. And that's the part that I think people have a tendency to misunderstand. When you made a comment, hey, this is just principles of engineering. This is just principles of dampening, I think is what you called it, right? That one attribute associated with suspension, compression, rebound, setting sags, how quick, how fast, how soft, how cone, valve, this, that. Why would you want to try to figure that out on your own? Now, I understand, just like in my world, I understand, especially at the pro level, a lot of these guys have been duped. They're like, oh yeah, for, $100,000, I can make you the next champion. And then they pay the money and they get nothing more than
no,
a glorified.
they don't. I'll give you said suspension principles. Let me give you one that should resonate with anybody who has more than one brain cell. And I think that most of us have at least two. I know you have more than two. So at the end of the day, I throw this out there on suspension, and people just have not in general thought about this. Now, I say this all the time. You look at people as an aggregate and you go, man, they're so stupid. But then the reality is every one of the people who are in this industry, from parents to dads to moms to kids, they're really smart. You're all smart. Every single one of you are smart people. So start applying that brain power and start thinking critically like you do in other aspects of your life, right? So for example, if you have 11 inches of suspension travel, which is approximately what a big bike has these days, right? 11 to 12. Can that bike, let's say it's 11, can it absorb a 12-inch bump without the front tire or rear tire leaving the ground?
Absolutely.
You think? Oh, I was to say, so if there's an 11 inches of suspension travel, that's how far the travel can move. And there's a 12-inch bump.
The rider and the bike? Because I'm thinking the
no. I'm just saying, if we just have a physics problem.
No. Okay. You've only got 11. You can't absorb 12 with 11.
Right. Basic physics equation.
Yeah.
Right. So at the end of the day, there's a limit to what your suspension is capable of doing. And then we have to make a sacrifice. And I'll give you a sacrifice. If I have 11 inches of suspension travel, and this is the engineering, and I go 20 miles an hour, whatever it is,
Yeah.
right? And I hit this bump, and I want to perfectly absorb the bump, and I do not want the handlebars to move. There is a perfect amount of energy equation that we can do that on. Now, theoretically, that would be, let's say it was 11 inches of travel and 11 inches of bump. We wouldn't have any damping is actually how this would work. We would have just a spring, and it would collapse and come out. Now, the forks would go up just a little bit when the spring is extending because that's forcing against something, right? So it has to push the bars up. That's just every action has an opposite and equal reaction. But if I put rebound damping in it, I can almost make it not do that. Unfortunately, the tire would not return to the ground if it didn't have any force, right? So
pushing it down.
Right. So those are the basics. So your suspension cannot do it all. It cannot absorb that 4-inch bump like it's butter and then go jump a 30-foot jump and land to flat. It can't do it. Yep. So what you do is we have the best compromise of everything. We have a suspension that can take the big hit for when we occasionally do that, but not perfectly. It could be a little stiffer. And then it hits the 4-inch bump and you're like, it was a little bit chattery, a little bit harsh, but not that bad. That's the setting that we go for. And then you fine tune 10% either way. Okay. You guys like more plushness and you guys like more stiffness. And we just move it either way. But this is not complicated. And as a parent, you should understand that there is no magical part on this planet that will make 11 inches of travel absorb a 12-inch bump. I don't care what a suspension company tells you. And if some guy wants to prove me wrong, put it up on YouTube and I'll eat crow all day.
Absolutely.
I'm waiting to see it. And you said something funny to me in text message. You're asking me about dynos or something like that. What was the, you just brought it up, like, do you trust dynos or what was the question again?
If there's one, well, I got quite a bit of individual subjects that Alessi brought up that people were asking me about, like when Alessi said he got an obnoxious amount of bikes, people were like, what is that number? The subject on dynos, you know, Tony was talking a lot about the idea that they get this multitude of bikes, and then first thing he would do is put them on a dyno, then he'd, you know, tag them and, you know, here's what it's supposed to put out stock, but here's what it's actually putting out stock. But because it's stock, we're going to make this a bot bike. So then the question has come up. There's a lot of debates amongst motor builders on that subject of dyno or not dyno. Does the temperature on race day when the bike's under full, if you were to dyno a motor 5 times, would you get the same numbers? That's outside my wheelhouse. I don't understand. I understand the complexity of the question. I don't have the vaguest idea.
So I think, what were you saying?
How would I argue with somebody like that?
Somebody's arguing that it just has no value or something like that. Like the dyno is just not useful.
The dyno is just not useful. It's the information. The information is not relevant to a bike on the track in a race setting. What's your thoughts on that?
I'll pose a question before I answer my opinion on that question.
Okay.
So if dynos are not useful, then why does every single national championship, world championship level racing at any form use dynos?
That's
Formula One,
hard to argue with
dynos. NASCAR, they use dynos. Mitch Payton, he uses dynos. Star Racing, they use dynos. Factory Honda, they use dynos. So if they're not useful, then why would you invest the money? They're not cheap.
Is it only relevant at a professional level, or do you feel it has the same relevant? I guess engineering is engineering, whether it's a 65 or 450. Right?
Okay, so is your bike faster or not? How have you tested it? Okay, some dads might actually have a method that's pretty good. But if you just go off your kid, well, they're not that great of a dyno. The human body is very good at sensitive change, meaning, okay, A to B, back to back, I can kind of feel a difference. We're pretty good at that. We're almost too sensitive. Like 1% difference in certain areas, we're really sensitive to, which is frustrating from an engineering standpoint. Well, I don't like this suspension setting. You went 1 click in. Dude, it's not even 1/4%.
Yeah.
Right? Like, okay, but you can feel that. So that's valuable. But absolutes, we don't have like a calibrated butt dyno, meaning day to day, week to week. I couldn't put you on a 10 horsepower bike and you'd say, yeah, that's 10 horsepower. And then next week, go to 10 horsepower bike. Yeah, that's exactly 10 horsepower. We don't have that ability, right? That's where the dynos are really good. So to answer that question a little bit more in depth, dynos are a tool. How you use that tool is not universal. Right? I might have a 10 millimeter wrench, but maybe there's another use for a 10 millimeter wrench, or maybe there's a wrong way to use a 10 millimeter wrench and there's a right way to use a 10 millimeter wrench. Right? So the same with the dyno. I mean, I look at it like this. This is where data came in useful for us, is when we have onboard track data from the bike, we know what temperature it runs at. We know the ambient air temperature. We know what coolant temperature you had it at. We can data what your oil temperature was. We know what throttle position you were. We knew what RPM you were primarily at or asking for out of this corner, because we have GPS data on the bike and know where you are on the track when you're at this throttle position, right? Like all of these factors. That becomes very relevant when you then apply it to your dyno testing. So if I dyno test a bike the way that a lot of shops do, which is I just want to publish a number. So I'm not going to warm it up all the way. I'm going to keep the coolant temps a little bit low. Bam, I'm going to go get it jetted in time so it makes maximum power in a non-realistic scenario. And yeah, that's never going to correlate on a racetrack. You as a dad will be like, I don't know, my motor builder says I made 5 horsepower, but we can't tell it's out there.
Gotcha.
Did the bike actually make 5 horsepower in the conditions that it was run in? Well, if it doesn't, then no, your bike did not make actually 5 horsepower. And that's the area where you have to be honest as a shop. So when we publish stuff on YouTube or I do my own work, internal work, our goal is and it took me years to try to hone in on 2-strokes in particular.
Okay.
What procedure replicates what that kid is applying to that bike on the track? And why 2-strokes in particular are challenging is because they're super, super pipe temperature dependent. The pipe is what drives horsepower in a 2-stroke. And I'm not going to go down that too far, but if you know 2-strokes at all, you know that that's true. If I take the pipe off, it makes no power. And the pipe works off the speed of sound and it works off sound waves. And those sound waves are 100% dependent upon the temperature of the gas inside. So the speed of sound changes versus gas temperature.
Okay.
And gas density, right? It's all an equation that's very complicated. They're actually one of the most 2-strokes are insanely complicated. Like that's why I like them. They're far more complicated than 4-stroke. If you got a lot of money, you'll make a 4-stroke run. Yeah. You just got to have a lot of money and time to make a 2-stroke run. You can give a rich guy all the money in the world. If he doesn't have the right mental approach to it, they'll never make it run. Like they're tough.
That makes sense.
So if I don't replicate what you do on the track with the dyno, I don't get the temperatures of the engine correct, the coolant temperature correct, the clutch and oil temperature correct. If I don't get the pipe temperature replicated correctly, meaning, do you have a fan blowing on that pipe directly on the dyno or do you not? Do you have it covered in a little bit of mud or a little bit of heat wrap like maybe it gets on the track or do you not? Are you loading it from a certain way or scenario that mimics how the track loads it or not? And when we do different types of tests, for example, where do you start your run at? How do you start your run? Do you get it hot ahead of time? Where's your pipe temperature at? Which runs are recording data? Which runs are we not recording data? That type of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can lie a little bit, although the dyno doesn't really lie, but it might give you results that are optimistic when the bike's not hot and you've done these things. And then you actually get it hot and you actually get the pipe up to temperature and you actually get it loaded and you go, oh, I got some work to do, right? Like these are the factors. So, and then on the flip side of that, and I'll give you another example. This is the challenge of 2-strokes.
Yeah.
What works really good off the gate, instantly revved up on the gate, no load. It's not really that hot yet. Pipe's not got a lot of heat in it because it hasn't been making horsepower under no load and the gate drops. What happens now? There's not many dynos that measure now.
Yeah.
They measure over a second or 2 seconds or 5 seconds or 10 seconds, whatever your dyno load time is.
Sure.
So that is very challenging. That's where you do, okay, I think I have a good package here. Go do some starts. Oh, it bogs every single time and the stock bike doesn't. Okay, why? What's going on? What can I change? Let me go change this. Oh, it doesn't bog. Okay, I know what it is, but I don't know why it, that type of stuff, right?
Yep.
So it's really complicated. So is there value to the dyno? Yes. It's the only way I'll ever make something fast. I can guarantee you that there's no shop on the planet that's winning national championships that doesn't use a dyno.
Interesting.
None. But on the flip side, there are a lot of good running bikes that haven't been on a dyno, right? They've just gone and tested, but it's how do you test? So it's tough. But to me, if you know what you're doing and why, which is the more important thing, right? Why do I do these things? Then yes, the dyno is incredibly useful. For example, here at the shop, it is today, I think, let me see. I think it's 100 degrees today. It's pretty damn hot today. Texas is always hot. And 100 degrees today. Not that humid for Texas. We've had a dry spell. Where is the humidity at? Feels like 104. So really, 35%. That's super low for our area.
That's low. Yeah.
Right. Normally we're 60 to 80% in the summertime.
Yep.
Feels like 115, 120 type of a deal.
Sure. My
dyno's outside, like it's in the shop, but it's out ambient air. And so when I have a bike jetted and we jet year round, we have from 30s to whatever time of the year is.
Yeah.
But I have a good indication of what jetting you need at Loretta's because I can wake up early in the morning and go dyno that bike.
Sure.
Right. And I can do it when it's the heat of the day. And I can do that. And then in the wintertime, I can assimilate jetting data for that bike for a 2-stroke. Right. So it's very, very relevant. Now, I do believe if you lived in an area that's like Southern California and it was in the coastal and it was 60 degrees and it was beautiful, dry air, you would have an eye opener the first time you went to Loretta's and were like, you're running what jets? No way. It's going to blow up because you hadn't experienced that condition. Right. So Yeah, so there's relevancy to it, and that's just the stuff you just learn over the years. So yeah, I've learned a lot over the years about, hey, this didn't, this bike's making power on the dyno, and then I go drag race it versus stock bike head to head, and I don't see that. What's going on? What am I doing wrong? Because the dyno doesn't lie. That's the whole purpose of it.
Right. Yep.
Right. So then that's where you go, oh, okay, maybe the pipe temperature's off, or maybe this is off, or maybe that's off, right? Whatever it is. And so that's a little, complicated on it. Now, on the 4-stroke side, I'll be frank, the dyno doesn't lie. If you have an honest dyno operator, which is not, it is hard to come by, who knows how their dyno works. We built our dyno and know how it works.
Yep.
So pretty much what it says your 4-stroke is doing. I can assure you of that. And for us, and this is counterintuitive to most people, our 4-strokes make the most power when they're the hottest. And that's because the oil temperature drops. And the oil temperature gets hot, and then the viscosity drops, and we have a lot less friction throughout the motor. And the number one causational loss of power you can't do anything about in a 4-stroke is friction, right? I can make more air and blah, 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 but I can't change the piston to bore and ring friction. I can't do it.
Sure.
I mean, we work on it, right? But I can't make it way better. But if the viscosity of the oil drops and the viscosity of the water in your water pump drops and all these factors, then you'll see, so for me, a 4-stroke, when it's hot, it makes the most power that it's going to make. And I say hot to within its runnable region.
Sure.
Once you start puking coolant and you get beyond its intended design range, yeah, they can start to lose power for various reasons. But yeah, so for that side, I think 4-strokes are actually, in that aspect, like they're pretty simple. If they make the power they say it's going to make, they make that power. And then the hard part that you do the track is just how good is the tune-up? Like, is it crisp? Is it clean? Like I said, when that scenario, when that gate, is your mapping correct? And the only way for us to learn that was trial and error, just a million different ways until it does that.
Sure.
Or you do what we did. We invest in data boxes. You put them on the bike. And when the gate, oh, wow, it went lean, or it went rich. Oh, okay. Now I know what it is. I don't have to go leaner or richer and figure out what the rider thinks is correct. And so that's that side of things, but it never ends. I mean, I'm at a pretty high level in this sport, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Most shops.
Yep.
And I'll tell anybody who wants to listen, which I had said to you, is I'm pretty smart, but there are a lot of guys smarter than me out there in other forms of racing. I think motocross people would just be mind blown
away.
And like the technicians in MotoGP or even in Supercross. Some of these technicians are pretty damn sharp.
So. No, they're really sharp. Well, and that's why you and I always say, and some people may take this as a textbook cliche, but data drives decisions. And that to me is what makes us different as a company from a human performance standpoint. You've just spent time elaborating on that. And I thought it was interesting. We've talked a lot today about the parallels between the mechanical and the engineering world and the physiological. Look at something like sweat. You should always lose at least 1%, but you don't want to lose more than 2%. Then you start running the risk of dehydration, carrying less oxygen in the blood, overheating. And then, like you were saying, you're talking literally marginal percentages here or there that have a huge impact, humidity, blah, 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 blah. Well, if you just constantly draw a parallel, we're talking literally take a 100-pound athlete, right? You're talking a 1 to 2 pound deviation. You put that in the grand scope of everything. Literally, your athlete can lose 20, 25, 30, 35% of his or her power and endurance by being 3% dehydrated. 2, you're right on the edge. 1, 1.5, you're in the sweet spot. So you're talking about getting the motor to a certain temperature, but if you start spewing radiator fluid, you've gone that little bit too far. Now it takes a step back, and people are like, oh, well, where's that fine line? That's where the value is. Now, again,
I'll give you another aside. On, like you said, metrics, right? So you're talking about dehydration and power and performance. We have talked about the role of the temperature on the human body, and there's plenty of studies on this. You lose performance as ambient temperature climbs. That's a fact. It is what it is. We are a heat engine, just the same as your motorcycle engine is a heat engine. And a lot of people don't grasp that. Your body works off thermodynamics, which is super complicated engineering, but it really does. It converts what looks like a hydrocarbon, we talked about this, into CO2 and water. That's what you expel when you breathe. So every time you breathe, it's doing the same thing your engine does. Takes oxygen in, puts a hydrocarbon in, and expels water and CO2 out the tailpipe. It just does it at a much more powerful rate.
Sure.
So on that topic, right? Funny part about bikes is I have some families who are like, man, our bike's just so slow here at Loretta's. Like, and I don't mean us. I mean, over the years, you might have somebody who comes from an area where the weather's really beautiful and it's clean and crisp. And then they go to Loretta's and like, it's so slow. And it's like, or they go to a better example.
Mammoth.
I actually, yeah, Mammoth or Thunder Valley. It's actually the better example I would give, right?
Yeah.
Is, well, yeah, the air's less dense. Well, what does that mean? It's not running right. No, you got it jetted right. It's clean and crisp. It's running good. Your bike is right. You didn't expect it to be slower. Well, why doesn't it run like at home? Well, there's not
Right.
as much oxygen. And so you got to know that going into that. But what
Yep.
a lot of families don't know about Loretta's, and for example, like this year, it was fairly hot. And again, it wasn't hot versus here, although it was similar. And it wasn't that humid, in my opinion. It was a little bit humid. But
Yeah.
your bike from 60 degrees sea level and zero humidity to Loretta's is going to be down a solid 15 to 16, maybe 17% horsepower.
I didn't realize it was that high.
The
Wow.
density altitude could be somewhere in the range of 4,500 feet at Loretta's.
Mm.
Right. So it's like you going to the mountains at 4,500 feet at 60 degrees, no humidity, clean,
Yeah.
right? So yes, your bike might not feel like it felt when it was 65 or 70 degrees at home and was great and whatever, but everybody's on the same disadvantage. It doesn't matter how
Yep.
well you jet it. It's only can be jetted perfectly. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of people just really struggle with that. And so that's something that, again, do you have a plan to get acclimated to the heat? Do you have a plan to, how many, if you haven't ridden in that heat and done 20s, do you know if your bike's built in a manner that will do that? And what I mean by that is there are some builds, the way they're jetted and the way that they're set up is that they just are a little on the lean side. Like there's like on a 2-stroke, there's like lean and mean. And I don't literally always mean that, but lean and mean.
Sure.
Especially for, let's say, a 5-lap race. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
This is the fastest, for first couple laps, and it falls off a little bit. But by the time we get to the finish line, that was the best combo.
Yeah.
And then there's like, you could be slightly richer than that. And it's not quite as perfect over that 5-lap moto, right? But it's going to last the distance consistently the whole way. And you're down a quarter of a horse from the other setup. And then there'd be one jet richer than that, right? But over the course of a 20-minute moto at Loretta's in the heat and high humidity of the day, of those 3 settings, which one are you going to pick? Have you tested that at home?
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
So for example, if your bike's starting to get a little hot over on the 2-stroke side, it starts puking coolant. I heard Vincent Way had some kind of problem with the Super Mini this year at Loretta's. He commented on social media. If I were him, I wouldn't comment that I had a problem with my bike on social media when you're sponsored by the individuals that he is, but that's my opinion. No, he didn't disclose why or what. He said his bike got hot.
Yeah.
It's entirely possible that they were just a little bit off on that jet setting, just
jetting.
that one step in, right?
Sure.
And you should have aired that one step, but I don't know. And I know they're really well prepared. I know the ways, and he's here to be a top guy down the road. That's their goal too. That said, if he's living in California, training California most of the time, and it hasn't been as hot, I don't know if it is or it hasn't. Maybe they were just a little off on their notebook. Like, hey, yeah, we should have been one jet richer. But your body's equally important, right?
You're talking 1%. I mean, I hate to use this because it's a word that's adulterated, but those marginal gains, they're literally in the halves, the quarters, and the eighths of a percent. And like when we look at the temperature, when we're looking at sweating, we do temperature silos. And the longer we're with an athlete, we start with 10-degree silos. You sweat differently. Heart rate 180 to 185 at 70 to 72 degrees is a different sweat rate when it's 75 to 80.
Okay.
80 to 85. Your exact same analogy. Humidity, air temperature, intensity, and duration all dictate sweat, and it changes literally degree by degree. So take something like a 7:30 in the morning race. You start, ambient air temperature might be 80, it might be 90 the second half of that race.
Right. And did you jet accordingly, or, were you
jet?
jetted for 90 and then your bike blew up 4 laps in because it was muddy and it was early and it was cold out and all these factors?
And that's what we have to factor in with sweat, because your body's ability, because we do work on the same process system, right? We have to externally get rid of heat, exothermic process.
In order to put out work output on the body, you build heat.
Yep. So that's where we start to factor in. You've got a 7:30 in the morning race. You've got to eat 2 hours before. So you've got enough time to digest and purge. Nobody wants to get up at 5:30, but everybody wants to race at 7:30 and win without going in with the appropriate preparation. If you don't put gas in the bike because the mechanic says it's inconvenient and I don't want to get up early enough to put fuel in it and it runs out of gas, you fire the mechanic. The athlete does it and we go, well, little Johnny, little Susie doesn't like to eat in the morning. And I'm like, well, that's where knowledge costs you 20,000 because it took you 10 to get there, 10 while you were there, and now you're out.
Yep. And same with the bike, right? And it's not that I'm not tooting my own horn here, just to be clear about, I have purchased into the things that I've bought into to get better for me. That's the sad part, right? Like that's the sad part. I have a dyno that I use almost every day, luckily, because I need to for me in the shop. But that said, I thought people would be here every day. I bought the, I built that and then have now got a whole room I built for it and the whole 9 yards. But like, I have another dyno too. And I literally used it one time. And I plan to use it for engines specifically. So that's why I have that one. But I thought that thing would be just so busy. And I'm sure you're the same way. It's like,
Absolutely.
not that you're not busy. I'm just saying that there's certain technologies and things that you've created and developed that you're like, look, I don't just do this to make money. I do it because it's what I needed. And it's something to be better.
Well,
And yet people
I don't want
don't
this to
use it.
sound like a textbook cliche again, but stop trying to get better. Excuse me. Stop trying to get faster and focus on getting better. That's what I say every single day. Try to get better. Everybody, and I could get into the whole philosophical side of it, but everybody's focusing on output. Nobody's recognizing that it starts with input. I'm trying to teach myself the guitar. It's hard because it's new and it's different. But then once you get enough hours, right? 10,000 hours makes you a subject matter expert. You've got to get, nothing is easy at the beginning. You don't walk in the gym and lifting weights is never easy, but it becomes easier.
Right. Even when you get to an elite level and it's the most challenging weight you've ever done, it's still easier than your first day.
That's exactly it. And I always, because I get this question, does it ever get any easier? Yes. Go back and do phase 1 and you'll think it's easier. But if you're on phase 11 and I give you 12, once again, you're going to say it's hard. Well, that's because muscles have to go through confusion, adaptation, and then they become stagnant and stale. So my goal is to find out when that sweet spot is, how much load for adaptation without overdoing it, pulling a muscle, a tendon, or a ligament, and then change up the program just frequently enough so that there's constant anabolic growth.
Well, Tony, like on our side, the bike side, Tony Alessi said they dynoed every bike. Now they had a lot of bikes to where there was a big disparity, right? Not every parent does that. They go buy 4 or 5 or 2.
Yep.
And these are the 2 you got. Right. Okay. I get it. There's, and sometimes of those 2, your kid might be like, yeah, that one's just been better since day one. Well, that should be your stock bike. Get off that damn thing.
Yeah.
And make that your stock bike. Right.
Yep.
So if that's what you're doing. But I, as a shop, could tell you tomorrow, if the people don't think the dyno is valuable, I promise you bring those 2 bikes in, your kid says one's better than the other one, it will show up. I promise you. That's if all things equal. Right now, you jetted one and the other one's not jetted. Oh yeah, it's a little cleaner and crisper and it sounds better. Okay, that's different. But if their kid, no, this one's always been faster, I promise you, it will show up on the dyno. It's incredibly sensitive to 1/10 of a horsepower repeatedly, which is just crazy. But the physics is simple.
Yep.
So at the end of the day, like Tony did that, and they're one of the most winning amateurs on the planet. How come he knows that? And for example, AC on the flip side of that, you don't think Mitch and the boys at PC didn't hand pick his stock bikes and say, hey, that is a damn good stock bike? Of course they did.
Yeah. And,
of course they
did.
A
lot of people don't realize that Adam is from essentially Daytona Beach, Port Orange, and him and his dad lived in their motorhome parked in the parking lot of Mitch Payton's PC factory because Alan was in there every single day with Mitch. Every single day. If you guys go back and watch, this is when Adam was doing he's riding around on his little scooter in the, throughout the PC's warehouse, bugging everybody, right? They were plugged in just like Tony. One of the things I was going to text you about, and I apologize, I forgot to do it. Did you see that social media post that Daniel Blair put out? And it was one of the 65s and it said it was legal.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I did see that post. Yes, go ahead.
And the first thing I thought of was the very first image in my head was Tony Alessi saying, we dynoed all of our CR80s. They're supposed to come in at 18, and we had some that were 22, but it was stock. So what we do? We tagged it and we put it on the side. Exactly what you just said. If it's putting out 4 more horsepower, shelf that bad boy.
Yeah.
And then when they break you down and it's a legitimate stock bike, it was dynoed and you knew it was 4 horsepower more, you saved it, and then you're able to use it legally. That's another benefit of having, especially when you're talking multiple motors.
I mean, there's enough families who are doing this that have this resource, that go buy 10 freaking bikes a year, right? That you should be putting this effort in. It's not that hard. Now, granted, I will admit, I do not think there are a plethora of good dyno shops in the country currently. And I'll tell you parents why. You guys don't want to spend the freaking money to get the talented individuals like myself and others to put in this time. Like, for example, I probably should go into other forms of racing with the talents that I've developed. There's more money in it, right? There's more money in these other forms of racing. I like dirt bikes. I know dirt bikes and that comfortability, right? For me to learn a
Hmm.
whole new form of racing would be a hell of a challenge this late in my career, right? But at
Sure.
the end of the day, that is partly on the industry, meaning nowadays you families are like, well, just I'm gonna go run this stock bike. Well, then how come this one
Hmm.
sucks versus that one? Why don't you go find out?
Why?
It
Yeah.
wouldn't cost you hardly any money compared to what you spend going. I hate, and I'm glad we're at this point in life. There's more Americans than ever that can go spend $200 to go get a couple drinks with their old lady at the night and go get a nice meal and maybe watch a concert or watch a
Yep.
live band. Like $200 would be nothing to you guys.
Yep.
That's all it would cost you to come run 2 hours with the bikes on the dyno. And I guarantee you, if you, the dad who probably knows how to change a wheel, help me do it, we could go through 10 bikes in 2 hours. I promise it. Just bam,
Yep.
bam, bam. So it wouldn't cost you hardly any money, right? Okay, you got to eat at home tonight.
But the knowledge that you get out of it and
oh,
what you can do to leverage it.
and then you have dads who are in denial, and I've had that happen. Well, let me
Oh
bring it
yeah.
by. There's no way it's that slow. I
Well, I
promise you, it's that slow.
literally just this afternoon, this is my third podcast of the day. And in between that, I had a product meeting, and it was with a company out of the Netherlands. And as most people know, our largest business segment is the endurance division: triathletes, runners, cyclists, gravel bikes, etc. And I was we're looking at this new technology, and we're looking at different materials that control core body temperature and some really cool science stuff. Well, they are deep into the triathlon world. And at the very beginning of the conversation, I'm immediately speaking about moto. And he's very polite and he says, I'm confused. He goes, I thought you were a triathlon company. I said, well, triathlon's our biggest segment, but my passion project is over here in the moto world, because the amount of knowledge that the sport needs to get better and be healthier is such a passion project. And what made me think of that is when you said, look, I go into kart racing, I can go into other types of racing, make more money, have less headaches. But there's just, and I say it every time, the first time you ride a motorcycle, it gets in your blood and it never comes out. And it'll always be my first love. And I'm the only one in our company. I selfishly manage exclusively the moto market because it's my love. I absolutely, it's the
Snake
best.
bit, right? Something
Yeah.
about dirt bikes and motorcycles in general is
Just something that
enjoyable. And there's
nothing can
nothing
replace it.
better than seeing like culmination of success, right? I
Yeah.
mean, it's just
Well,
like,
and
wow,
that's
that's
what we
awesome.
want. That's what we want this podcast to be about, is if we can help athletes and parents get from A to C in the straightest way, most, the shortest amount of time, least amount of resources. I do want to say this in closing, and it's kind of funny. What I find interesting, and I'm going to offend some people here, but it is what it is, and it's not intentional. But the ones that I verbally laugh out loud in my staff meetings are the C class heroes, because I could, the amount of C class parents that have told me, we've heard it all before. We get it. We know it. And there's some few that have some discretionary funds, and then they go to a facility, or maybe they build a facility or buy a facility, or they go and they get a trophy coach, and then they promote it like, look at us, we're the real deal. And I'm like, you're stepping over a dollar to pick up a penny. Because at the end of the day, yeah, you've got all the money in the world poured into these bikes, and you've got coaches, and you've got all this other stuff, and you're real big on social media about tooting your own horn, but you're getting absolutely left behind. And I'm not gloating in it. It's interesting to me when you have C class heroes and their parents, especially ones that have money, that are like, oh, we know it all now. I'm like, really? Really? Last time I checked, you didn't clean house at Minio's, and you didn't clean house at the Winter Am Series, and you didn't clean house at Daytona, Spring-a-Ding, Freestone. Oh, you got to Loretta's, but what happened? If you're such the big deal, I thought you had it all figured out, and then you're a mid-pack finisher, or there's a lot of inconsistencies. I'm like, wow, that's it. Now, again, I'm not gloating in it.
No.
What I'm saying is, if you're on this side being told by a
Yep.
C-class parent that we know everything, we've heard that conversation before, really. So if I were to ask you right now, what's a glycogen synthase enzyme, and what's the difference between being hot and being metabolically warmed up, and what enzyme in the blood activates the replenishment, or not activates, but rather enhances the replenishment of depleted sugar. If you've heard it all before, then you should be able to tell me that answer. And the reason why I say it in that context is, the first time I talk about glycogen synthase enzyme and all of the things that are involved with the warm up, I give it in a very, very brief, superficial. And then year two, we add a little bit more complexity because you have more experience. By year three, it's a lot more complexity. By year five, it's PhD deep. because I'm going to hold you accountable to the knowledge that you have with the experience you've gained. There's where the accountability, when you go B class, go pro, I don't want you dependent on me.
Hey, I'll give you a good example. Like you said something earlier, and I appreciate you saying, but it's funny. You said something like, if we figure something out at the pro side, and I'm always working, that's what my business is geared toward, not to sell to pros, but that's what my interest is in. I want to build
What's the
stuff that
highest level
competes
of
at the highest
racing?
level, right? And
Yeah.
I'll be frank, you cannot buy an engine from me that is better than all the factory engines. We don't have it.
Yeah.
I wish we did.
Sure.
Right. I'm working towards it every day, but at the end of the day, that's their job. Right. And not only is it their job, it's some guy at Honda's job. It's some guy at Kawasaki's job. It's not just Mitch, right? Like he's not the only person involved
in an
that
awkward
project.
way, it's their job to be better than you versus you trying to be better than them. Think about
Right.
that
Well, but I
paradigm
mean,
shift.
do I think, well, anyway, we're always working towards that. Right.
Sure,
But at the end of the day, whatever I learn there is just what gets sold.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm, there are shops that do this, and it's there's a psychology to it. So if you're a consumer and you fall victim to this psychology, you're not the only one. You're in the 99.9% of individuals who fall victim to sales consumer psychologies. For example, there are shops that are like, well, I'm not going to sell you my A package. That's reserved for our winner.
Yep.
But you can have our C for now. And if you stick with us and you get better, you can have our B, and then we'll say you're our A.
Yep.
Now, I do have different levels of packages based upon budget.
I was going to say it's based on money, but not based on hiding technology from you.
I've had parents buy the best I have in the C class and swear that I didn't sell it. I'm like, dude, that's the best. Mm-hmm. You have it. That's not why your kid's not winning. You're 22 seconds lap off of first place on the same motor that you got. Right. Yep. Sorry.
It's reality.
It's because they've bought into that psychology. Mm-hmm. Right. And so you have to understand that when somebody's telling you that stuff, you got to go, do I want to work with this guy? I just want your best, bro. Mm-hmm. Just give me your best. Now, I will tell a parent plenty of times, like, hey, with where you're at, you probably don't need this. Mm-hmm. And you don't need to spend that much money, and it's not going to be relevant to you for performance. You're just not going to get better on it. If they're like, I don't care, I want it. And if a lot of times these parents are smart and they go, nah, it's fine. I just want to tell my kid, hey, you got the best and no excuses. You get 30th, no excuses. Okay. Like you've talked about, maybe the kid's not ready for the power and all that. Maybe he's going to get out of shape. Maybe it is the wrong decision for your child to have the fastest bike out there. Don't get me wrong. But, it's not our job to dictate that. Our job is just to say, hey, what do you got? What's your budget? What's your intervals? Blah, 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 blah. What's your maintenance look like now? Hey, either change that or we won't sell this to you, right? Your maintenance needs to look like this. But yeah, we don't withhold information. And if I have a great C-class client who's like, hey, Derek, I just want the baddest ass, whatever, pick a color bike this year that they ride. Yep. And I've got 10 of them, and I'm going to drop you off 3 of them, and you can play with it all year and just send me a bill whenever you want. I will do that for you.
Sure.
We've done that for people, right? Like you will literally have my pro class technology. That will be the best bike I know how to build.
Absolutely.
Right? Because I'm going to take what I got, I'm going to work hard on your bike, and then blah, 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 blah. But it's funny how that works, right? Like whatever you learn at the highest level of our side of it, of human physiology, you're going to tell to the first person coming into your business. Now it might be dumbed down and it might not be all the details and they may not have the knowledge yet, but it's not like you're going to withhold good information from your clients. You're going to say, hey, I want you to be successful. You're one of my clients. Mm-hmm. I'm going to give you the best information as I know it today. And I'm going to give it to you in a form that hopefully you can digest. If you don't, let me know. Yep. And then we, as a team per se, are going to grow and build your knowledge and grow and build your fitness and grow and build your hydration and grow and build your rest and grow and build, right, all these things. It is crazy to me though. And then the other side is the instant gratification of today. Oh, I bought this mod motor, I should win tomorrow. No, you're a long ways off of that.
You're focusing on the output, not the input.
Right.
And that's
Same
the
with
problem.
It's I did the Coach Robb program for 3 weeks. Why am I not, dude?
Oh yeah.
Fitness takes years, but it takes in a shorter time, 3-4 months before a very meaningful, physical. And that's where the HIIT thing comes in. I've been researching this on something else for something else. HIIT is the most effective way, from what I've read, to make massive fitness gains for an untrained individual if you only look at it in a 4-week outlook or 5-week outlook, which is how most studies work. Oh, well, we took untrained individuals and we put them on a HIIT workout for 5 weeks versus a guy who did zone 2 cardio. Oh, wow, his lactate threshold went up and his peak strength went up and this went up and all these metrics went up 30%. Yeah, because the individual was untrained. The body adapted very rapidly as it does early on. Yep. But how does that study look when you do it 12 weeks and 16 and 18 and 20 and 30 and a year in? Exactly. Oh, all of a sudden they get burned out, fatigued, tired, sick,
Well,
and
that's
the
where
adaptation rate
context,
changes.
that's where
Right.
context has to be in place. Somebody can say that this configuration of the motor is the gospel. Well, no, not if it's at altitude and it's crisp
Right.
air and there's no humidity and it's 60 degrees. It's not a one shoe fits all. And that's where the context comes in. That's where I get so frustrated with the human performance side of our industry. Just do it because I said so. I call bullshit. If you don't know why you're doing it, please don't do it. I'm failing you as a physiologist, but understand everything I'm asking you to do is based on where you're currently at, and you tell me where you want to be 3, 6, 12, 3 years from now. And then we have to divide and conquer. So we take the races that you've put together, we take the characteristics of those races, we look at what your strengths and weaknesses are, both physically and mentally. We take the resources you have access to, and we put them together. It's why but here's something that I want to make sure people clearly understand. When you make a comment that your pro level information is filtered down based on budgets and availability, right? If I was legally allowed to tell you the amount of riders, both off-road and motocross at a professional level, that are using our energy fuel, it goes into the comment you made about buying into the psychology of it. If you see a particular motor builder out of California and you see it on 80% of the bikes, okay, props to the guy or the girl, whoever owns that business, right? They're saying that if you see that engine maker or builder XYZ over and over again, eventually you're going to believe that your bike is going to handle and perform like theirs, when there's so many more elements that get involved with it. So you've bought into the psychology of it. Okay, I understand that's branding, but you have to look at it a little bit further. How many people, and I don't think there's anybody listening, doesn't know of somebody who advocates that they use a product, they run a sticker on their bike, who's not actually using that product?
And it happens more than people know.
Exactly.
Right? Like it's so deep. It's Steven. And I hate to say it. At the pro side,
it's reality.
You take dollars.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I'll give a great story because the team's longer around. And I don't know this firsthand, meaning I watched it in person, but my source on it did.
Okay.
So I was testing various motor oils, what makes the most power. We do this not every year, but every year and a half or 2 years, or maybe try something new. I mean, oil technology hasn't like drastically changed in the last 10, but we always test something new. And I'm always chasing, right? I'll chase any gain I can find.
Yep.
And so we settled on, at that time, now we're talking over 10 years ago now. We settled on Mobil 1 car oil for this whatever weight. I'm not going to even share that, but if you, a client will share it with you. And so that was like, it was like 1 horsepower better than a crop of good oils. And then like 2 horsepower better than, let's say, what a lot of people in motocross run. And we're going to do a whole YouTube video on that. So someday you can check in on that. And I'm not here to like withhold it now, but I just want to withhold it for that YouTube video.
Sure.
So the difference being like 2 horsepower by changing your motor oil, like you can't tell me you don't want that. Now, is that something like, oh, it yanked my arms out? No, it's just everywhere. So it's not going to be something that's a power character change. It just makes more power. And at the time I was flabbergasted. I was like, there's no way. There's not that much friction. But as we talked about with oil temperature and all these factors, all those factors come into play. So I settled on that. That's what we ran for our clients at that time frame who spent the money with us and said, hey, I want a good package. Yep. This is all you need to run. No way. Yep. Go run it. Just go run it. It's not a dirt bike oil. It's right off the shelf at every auto parts store you could get at the time. And it was a different weight recommendation than what stock was for the particular package, and blah, 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 blah. Well,
again,
at that
lots
time,
of elements, lots of elements.
all these things. So at that time, Geico Racing was sponsored by AMSOIL. Now, AMSOIL is a great oil. They're very heavily tested. They're one of the few companies that has an in-house dyno, tests really hard, does oil analysis, all these things. It's a great oil. Don't get me wrong. At that time frame, though, that team could give 2 shits about how long those dirt bike engines last. They want to win races, and they rebuild them every single week. Right. So if this one has a little bit more wear at 10,000 miles than the other one, they don't care. They want horsepower. AMSOIL's not in the market of selling that. AMSOIL's in the market of selling oils that last a long time for your car. They're durable and all these other factors as a company, and where their engineering focus is. And that would make sense as an engineer. You're a lubrication engineer. I want my oil to last a long time, and I want the car to last a long time. So again, not talking, I didn't see it firsthand, but I was told by a guy who did see it firsthand that the team ran the same oil that we ran, poured it in those bottles that said AMSOIL on it. And that's what they ran for their motocross bikes because it made the most power at that time frame. Now, at that level, and I tested the AMSOIL too, and the AMSOIL is one of the closest to the oil we ran, meaning we're talking tenths of horsepower. For most of you guys, could mean no difference, right?
Negligent.
Like you
Yep.
can't tell difference.
Yep.
But to a team that's chasing, and this was one of the Amsoil Geico team, right? It's
Yeah.
a championship pedigree team that had a huge budget with the best riders and was basically the modern star, or the previous star. So, and PC, whatever. Didn't use the product that paid a huge portion of their, now in their practice bikes. And, I guarantee you they use Amsoil. They got product.
Right.
Like, I have no
Yeah.
question about that. But
Yep.
for that one day of race day where they're trying to get a tenth of a horsepower, they didn't. Now that's just an
Mhm.
example of a team's not around, and I'm willing to share, right? But that's all over the place. And you name it. It could be energy fuel for your body. It could be, all
Well,
sorts of consumer product.
Well, that it just goes back to there's nothing that we have talked about that we're not implementing. And I'm like you, I cannot stand these so-called trainers that, hey, for just another $1,000 around the corner, I'll fix your nutrition. And for another 500, I'll fix your hydration. Because, and this is why we started Complete Racing Solutions as a package, right? Because I'm talking to parents who went and hired a strength and conditioning coach. Then they went and got a massage therapist. Then they got a facilitated stretcher. And then they got a nutritionalist. Then they got a sports psychologist.
Right. I mean, you're talking so many segments.
Well, nobody knows what the left hand is doing.
No,
right?
you can't. Yeah, that's
Moto
not right.
is so different.
It'd be like hiring me to do your port job while you hire so-and-so to do your ignition and so-and-so to do your carburetor and so-and-so to do your head.
And
right?
then put it all together.
Just come
and
on.
then expect it to work.
Yeah.
And what I became aware of is talking to the parents that A, it became very expensive, and B, the rider didn't get better. And this is one of the themes that we heard at Loretta is we spent all this money at a facility. We had this riding coach. And why did we not get better? That's why I said, let's not focus on going faster, but focus on getting better. And literally, I say at my staff meeting every week, we have to get better every day. We have to be better. And I'm listening to the parents at Loretta saying, why weren't we better? And I'm like, I don't know. If you don't have data, that's why I say data drives, the decisions. I don't know if your physical limiter is mental or physical. I don't know if that physical is aerobic or anaerobic. I don't know if it's a flexibility or an injury issue. I don't know, but I have systems to find it. And that's what I want the parents to realize. We can close up the show with this whole mindset. I've gone 18 years. You've gone over 15 years, right? 10, 12 years. And we're seeing the same repetitive mistakes year after year after year. And that's what I hope everybody that's taken the time. This is a really good show today with a lot of content. We appreciate, number one, that you stayed with us, but really step back and ask yourself, what have you done in the last year that was different than the year before?
And we have a whole, so, this has been an introductory show. The last couple that we've had, our goal moving forward, I think we have a clear direction for next year, or this, I should say now moving forward. Is basically we would like to lay out, hey, did your letters not go that great? Okay, great. Now follow along, and step by step, we can give you a lot of, we've already touched on all these topics, but we're going to try to maybe hone in on these topics and say, okay, here's a topic of hydration. Here's a topic of heat tolerance. Here's a topic of motorcycle. Here's a topic of sponsorship. Here's a topic of team managers. Here's a topic of guests that have been there, done that, their insights. And so that's the goal of the show, is to just give you don't make the same mistake that we've now seen repetitively for, you said, over 15 years.
Yep.
And I see it all the time, and it's like, I could lead that C-class kid in the suspension. I led you to the trough. I promise you, I don't have any ill will towards you on your forks. I promise. I promise. You may not love them because of this or that, but I promise you. And now your wrist probably hurting. Unfortunately, I hope it's better. I don't know if it's healed. I'm going to send a message after this. Hopefully you didn't break it, and hopefully it's feeling good. But maybe you learned, and I told you that lesson through years of testing. You just didn't, you had to go hurt your wrist to get taught it.
Well, and that's why
that's unfortunate.
I get dumbfounded because we're supposed to be the smartest species, but we'll do so many things to self-sabotage. Now, again, I'm not saying that I expect people to just jump in and give me all the faith in the world, but we both have results. Our goal is to try to help as many people as we can. Shop local, get local help, get people that can help you, but make sure that they're competent. Make sure that these questions are getting answered.
Like you said, shop local.
Mm-hmm.
I have dealers that sell HP products.
Mm-hmm.
It's mine 100%, but it's through their brand. And how many shops, that really do that on the mod side, that are willing to show with a guy who probably could steal it exactly what we're doing.
And he will.
And I have some of that, right? But at the end of the day, I do this for two reasons. One, he may have a better relationship with you than I will. And he's local to you. You can take your bike in and out. It solves that problem.
Yep.
Right. And number two is for a lot of these guys, what has sold them on is, wow, shit runs really good. Oh, okay. Well, you know what? Instead of me dicking around in the dyno and trying to sell you and trying to build this bike, I'll just do that. He doesn't have to dick with you. And I don't mean that in a negative way. Like he
No,
can just port the damn cylinder.
Yep.
And then here we go. And I've had a couple good ones. And, you know, I think that, and we've had really good success with a couple of them. Like a couple of the individuals have podiumed and won titles in this year. So at the end of the day, like we're trying, I sell a product to make money. Yes. But I sell a product to make money that works because I want you to be successful. Just because, hey, your success is my success. I like saying we win titles. I like that, right? Like that's what I do this for. So at the end of the day, I think that that's the point is, sure, we make some money, but I can promise you that one port job, if I got your business or didn't get your business, isn't the difference between me making my month or not making my mortgage payment, right? Like we thankfully have enough. You have enough clients through all your segments that it's not like, oh, I'm here to hurt your performance as an athlete. No. The goal is for you to be better. And so, and that's why we talk about it. I mean, I could go on in days about how we don't like how MX Sports is ran on all sorts of segments, but that's not our goal for the show. Our goal for the show is to help you be successful at any MX Sports event you ever go to in your life.
It's getting from where you're at, where you want to go in the quickest, most efficient, and most economical way possible, period.
100%. So, you know, and again, you don't have to use me. You don't have to use coach, but if you follow what we talk about on the show, I promise you'll be much better off in the long term.
And also remember, you know, we put this show together to be a resource. So we'll make sure that we've got all of our contact information in the description box. Feel free to leave messages below. If you guys leave a message, I do get notification. If there's one for Derek, I'll text him and let him know, and he'll chime in there. He's good about checking it on a regular basis as well. Without sounding corny, we really want this show to be about you guys in regards to answering those questions, addressing the frustrations, speeding up the progression, both on and off the track. So we want to thank the number of people that have been watching the show is, you know, the numbers are continuing to grow quite a bit. Thank you. If you've subscribed, thank you for doing that as well. And as always, please feel free to leave questions and or email us, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. Derek, the Grant Langston Show was a banger, man.
Well, thanks for having me on.
Thank you for your time, man. It's always a pleasure. All right, we'll see you in the next one.